Hi everyone, welcome to Papaarade. My name is Robert. Thank you so much for joining. Today I'm going to be talking about the emotional roller coaster of surrogacy. Because let's face it, it is an emotional roller coaster. There's no better way to put it. Point blank, it's emotional. There's a lot of up and downs. It's a very, very complex process. There's a lot of people involved. There's especially a lot of uncertainty, but pending that everything goes well, it's totally worth it. It's worth all of the stress, all the pain, all the highs, all the lows. It's what it took to create our family, and I couldn't be more grateful for the process. I couldn't be more grateful for everyone involved, especially our surrogate. But it is a very, very taxing journey. There's a lot that goes into it. So I want to highlight some of those things for you today, but just I want you to realize that it is hard. Really, truly. I totally underestimated that. I never would have realized how complex and difficult everything could be. So if you're thinking about surrogacy, don't let that at any means stop you. If anything, just know that you have support like at our channel to get through it, and you have a lot of resources out there from others as well. But just know, I know that there's, agencies out there that say, oh, we're a one-stop shop and we take away all the hassle and all the involvement. And I get that there's premium agencies out there, they exist, but nevertheless, please, please, please don't take this journey lightly. Really understand what you're getting yourself into, especially, and I'm talking about the emotional part of it. All of the other logistics, that comes down to so many other factors, some definitely in control, some not in your control. Depends on circumstances, depends on your agency, availabilities, luck, circumstances, all those kinds of things. But I'm talking about the emotions of it, because that is something that no one could have ever prepared me for. I had no way to prepare myself for at all. So let's dive right in. So as I said, surrogacy is a journey. You don't just wake up one day and say, I want to have a baby via surrogacy. Maybe there are people that do that and that's great. But for us, for Martin and I, it definitely took time for us to accept, is this the way that we want to go? Is this the route that we want to go down? We looked at things like adoption. We considered so many factors. We did so much research. So the journey doesn't just start with, okay, let's start surrogacy. It starts way before. So for me to back up a little, also, if you know a little bit about my history, I'm an American. I moved to Germany 10 years ago. I'm now a German citizen. So already the last 10 years have been a lot of ups and downs of moving to a new country, finding a job, learning the language, integrating, kind of building and starting my life here and really thriving. But I would say where this particular journey started is actually with the COVID pandemic. There were so many things happening in the world, so many things happening in my personal life, in my relationship, my marriage, actually getting married during that time, with just a lot of things that happened with my husband, his job situation, whatever it is, my own job situation even. We all went through our own process during the pandemic. We all came out of it very differently. But I would say the journey kind of started there because so much in my life changed during that time. I basically re-evaluated all my priorities in life, basically. I had every kind of good, bad emotion you can think of. I felt every feeling imaginable. I had really good days. I had the worst of days. So having this kind of pandemic period of a couple of years and constantly reevaluating, what do I want in life? What do I want in my job? What do I want in my marriage? What do I want in my life? What happens, when life is over? Life is so short. People are dying, whatever it is. I went through so much during the pandemic. And in the end, I'm somehow grateful for the process because I'm very happy with my life now. Not to say that it wasn't easy, but the point is that's where the journey already started. So going through this whole soul searching journey of saying, what do I want in life? What is important in life? What matters in life? All of these kinds of things. So to begin, Martin and I, we got married, we moved, we kind of started a different kind of lifestyle. Before we were living in a big city. Now we live in the suburbs. We're a lot more in the nature. We have a dog. So kind of already just our everyday lives changed a little bit. We were forced to become morning people just between commuting, having a dog, and that sort of thing. So, kind of all of our priorities shifted a little bit, saying, well, we don't prioritize going out in the big city, going on big vacations, all these kind of things. It was more about creating our home, spending time together, starting the family with the dog, for example, being outside in the nature, finding new hobbies, finding that peace inside of me. And for me, the journey of meditation that I learned, that's really where it started. So we had this big shift in our lives, but then we kind of came to the point and said, well, what's next? And the thing is, Martin always wanted to be a parent. That was never any doubt of his. I was a bit unsure due to my whole past, living in New York, having a theater background, moving to Germany. I was really unsure if I ever wanted kids. But once all of those pieces of the puzzle started fitting together, and everything just started to align, and we kind of came out of this post-pandemic time. I, for example, had a new job where I'm now super, super happy. I have a wonderful house that I feel extremely comfortable in. I have an amazing dog who I had a lot of fun with. So the journey already started with all of that. And even though kids wasn't at the center of my mind at all, I was already really mentally preparing myself throughout that whole time. Fast forward a little bit, then when the conversations really started to get serious about us wanting to have a child, that was kind of the next big hurdle to get over, so to speak, was actually choosing surrogacy. So that's the first part of the emotional roller coaster, is finding out, is surrogacy right for you? Is adoption right for you? Is foster parenting for you? There's so much research, so much contemplation that goes into that. So first, just making that decision and really feeling comfortable and standing by it, and also getting your friends and family kind of on board if possible. That's a big challenge in and of itself. So that's the first thing, choosing surrogacy, not an easy thing. I was very against it in the beginning. I really, really did warm up to it once I actually did the research, especially once I knew that doing it in the US, I felt a lot more comfortable with the whole process. I knew that no one was being exploited during the process. The legal and the medical process is world-class, the best in the world that you can get. So kind of coming through that with some clarity kind of got me over that emotional hurdle. But that was really the first part, which was almost enough to have me back out of choosing surrogacy, because I just thought, wow, do I really want to go through with this? Like, that acceptance of, are we really going to go through with finding a surrogate and have a baby through surrogacy? I mean, the complexity of it, the money involved, all the loose ends, like being here in Germany and doing it in the US, and the travel, having a newborn, bringing it back to Germany, all of that, just accepting, saying, wow, are we actually going to do this? It's going to be very difficult. Do we want to? And maybe plenty of people say no, I don't know. But okay, so we accepted it. We decided to do it. Okay, so that was the first emotional hurdle that we kind of got over. But then you kind of get into this phase of really dreaming big all of a sudden. You already can kind of imagine yourself being a parent, or maybe having your surrogate and having that first FaceTime call with the first ultrasound. So you're kind of like dreaming big during this process, which is great. But then you have this huge emotional contrast at the same time, with all of those thoughts in your head of what's to come. Are there going to be any red flags? Are there going to be any stumbling blocks? Just the uncertainty, and we don't know what we're getting into. So it's like always this kind of back and forth of all of your hopes and dreams, but then kind of all your fears and thinking of everything that could go wrong almost. So it's like this yin and yang almost all the time, this constant pull in both directions. And that's really taxing on a person mentally, spiritually. It's not something that you're prepared for at all. And I think with any journey to become parents, no matter if you're doing it naturally through IVF, adoption, foster parent, whatever your journey is to become a parent, it is not easy. I mean, you have to really, as an adult, put so much of yourself aside. You have so much preparations to do. You need to find some sort of clarity. You need to prepare your house. You need to prepare your finances. People want to get everything in their life kind of together, if at all, or maybe it just happens as a surprise and you can't do any of that and you just have to adjust. So that's also something in of itself. So no matter what the process is, no matter what the situation, it's hard. So now we come to the next big emotional hurdle once you kind of think, okay, we're going to do this. There's resources out there. We're going to be all right. There's plenty of agencies. The surrogates, like surrogacy is a thing. It's out there. The surrogates are there. No problem. But the next part are the costs. So I think for a lot of people, they just say, I cannot afford surrogacy, so it doesn't apply to me. It's not something that I can do. Or maybe people think, yeah, I could, but do I really want to go into debt? Do I want to have a loan? Do I want to spend all of my life savings? Do I want to spend my inheritance? Do I want to ask people for money? Do I want to borrow money? Will the bank give me money? All of this kind of stuff. So that's kind of the next big crazy thing to go through is how am I going to pay for it? And then you start budgeting, you start crunching the numbers, you start talking to your family, you're looking at everything. What can I cut back in my life? How can we save? How can we manage this? I'm not going to get into all of the specific examples of our financial situation. Everyone has a different situation. And of course, people that choose surrogacy, of course, they lean a little bit more into maybe a higher income bracket. People are maybe saving for years and years to be able to do it, or people that decide to go down the path of surrogacy, especially gay men, might happen to be a little bit older in age because they didn't have all kinds of costs before with children. Maybe they're able to afford it, like whatever it is. But that is one of the biggest aspects of surrogacy. It is expensive because, you are compensating such an amazing gift that a woman is sacrificing, part of her body, her time to be able to give that gift to you. So it should also be paid accordingly, no doubt about that. And I was also aware through my research that especially during and after the COVID pandemic, the costs skyrocketed truly, because I think the first thing, which is a good thing, surrogates learned that they could actually earn more than they were before, which I think is great because perhaps before they were earning too little. And we're talking in the US, I can only speak about compensation there, but I would say in the US, after the COVID pandemic, surrogacy at least doubled in price. I'm going to just, put a general statement out there, but just kind of from the numbers that I've seen, surrogacy is more expensive than it was before. And not only that, because surrogacy is so widespread, because it's more normal to use surrogacy, there's more demand. And unfortunately, there's less of a pool of surrogates at the same time. So as we know, demand also increases prices. So in the last 5 years, the cost of surrogates have really gone up. As well, the medical industry, especially in the US, is very profit driven. So every single step in the process costs a lot of money. Those costs have gone up. You have inflation, whatever it might be. So unfortunately, cost is a big part of surrogacy. So every family situation is different. Everyone's going to budget different. Everyone's going to have their own situation. But once we kind of had clarity when it came to the financial aspects, that was then kind of like a big sigh of relief, saying like, okay, it's going to be a sacrifice. We're going to have to give up in a lot of our lives. We were looking at like every way that we could cut costs in our house. I don't know, like streaming platforms that we could cut out, coupon clipping, just looking at every single penny that we're spending and saying, how can we cut back because we need to save it to make this happen. Now you know how you're going to pay for surrogacy, or you think you'd, of course, there could unfortunately through the process be unexpected costs, unexpected complications, but you're feeling better about your finances. Then comes actually starting. Finding an agency is also a very daunting process, especially if you're starting basically from nothing. How do you know which agency to choose? Who do you know how to trust? Should you trust reviews online? Do you need to go and meet the people in person? There are, for example, surrogacy conventions that you can go to and talk to all kinds of agencies. That can also be very overwhelming because you think with everyone, they all kind of have different packages, or they'll present themselves differently, but maybe a lot of the same. And you really don't know. You don't know if you're making the right decision. It's such a big decision. So how can you know? And how can you know that everything will go right? And I mean, I even had people in my family when it came to our agency, which was a great choice in the end, but there was of course skepticism saying, well, is it the right agency? Are they scamming you? Are they taking all your money when they should, like whatever it might be? I don't know. No idea. I mean, luckily with our agency, we did know someone who had a kid through it. So at least we had some kind of personal connection, at least to say the agency is legitimate, it worked out, so at least there was that. Then you have kind of all these like premium agencies, which are even more expensive, but they are kind of like a one-stop shop. The surrogates are there. It's really like you're paying a higher premium, but the timeline is severely reduced. Whereas on the other hand, for us, we were really, really keen to say no, like we want to keep the cost down. We're willing to then therefore wait a little bit longer to find a surrogate because of that. So there's a lot of factors to consider. If you can afford it and want to just dive right into it, then great. If you're more like us saying, well, we need to try to keep the cost down as much as possible, then maybe you need to make some adjustments in your timeline. So this whole decision of choosing an agency and already thinking about all these steps and all these factors is very daunting. And even after making the decision, it's really normal to question that. And I'm not so much of this person. I'm the kind of person that when I make a decision, I stick by it, I stand on it, stand by it. I don't, think about all the other scenarios. But Martin, my husband, he's kind of the exact opposite. So he was really struggling through this whole process of saying, did we make the right decision? What about this agency? Oh, is that a red flag? Whatever it is. So definitely something to take in consideration is choosing an agency. So kind of the next hurdle is egg donation, embryo creation. And I must say, I think this was actually one of the easier parts of the journey, at least for us, because luckily with egg donation, there seems to be quite a large pool, and not large, but there seems to be a relatively larger pool of egg donors available. And because they're also able to donate multiple times, there's just more availability. So that process, it was also very unknown at any step or stage of this process. Like even I said, oh, it was a bit easier still. I mean, when you're put in a situation of having to choose an egg donor, I mean, that is not an easy task. It's not an easy feat. So that in of itself is quite a challenge, because at the end of the day, you're choosing the genetic mother of your child. This is the person that will share their genes, that will influence so much about them, perhaps their personality, their physical features, whatever it is, especially their medical history. There's a lot of factors to consider. So that could be a very, very difficult choice for a lot of people, and maybe a choice that they're very uncertain about. I think why it was quite a bit easier in our situation is because we were both aligned from the beginning. Through the selection process, we both quickly decided on the same egg donor. We were very happy with the decision. Kind of fast forward to the whole sperm donation, embryo creation process. That timeline moved quite quickly. There was really no stumbling blocks. The only reason why it was actually ever so slightly delayed, it could have gone probably even faster, is because us being in Germany, we wanted to do this process in California at the agency, the sperm donation there, instead of doing it in Germany and then, sending the specimen to the US. So we had a timeline of when we were going to be in the US, and we said, okay, this is our appointment date, this is what's going to happen. So however many months before when that decision was made, we had to just wait to fly to the US and make that happen. But had we been local in California, as so many people are doing embryo creation, egg donation, what have you, that process can go quite quickly. But now moving on, but still tied to that a little bit is, after we did our sperm donation, after our egg donor donated her eggs, there is of course a little bit of a waiting game. You don't know what the quality of your sperm is going to be like. You don't know during the egg retrieval procedure how many eggs are actually going to be able to retrieve. Are the eggs healthy? Could something go wrong during the procedure? There are a lot of medical unknowns with any procedure, of course, but I think especially for men, there could be this thought of, well, can I even produce sperm? Are my sperm healthy? Do I have enough? I didn't have this concern because for me, there was no doubt in my mind, but Martin, I know that this was a concern for him. He's a few years older than me. So he also just kind of being plagued by this whole emotional roller coaster. That was a fear for him, is, well, what if I, can't even create an embryo with my sperm? But, that's also something to consider. So there definitely are more pieces to the puzzle with the egg donation, sperm donation, embryo creation. Once we knew that we had healthy embryos, okay, that's also something else to consider, is another waiting game. Okay, you have healthy sperm, you have eggs available, but then they need to put them together. They're creating, the embryos and they're turning into blastocysts, then at least in the US, they're doing extensive genetic testing to make sure that all those embryos are healthy. They're also being ranked according to certain criteria. So already before, they never put together the sperm of men and the eggs of women in the US during the surrogacy process if both parties test positive for any type of genetic disorder. So it's okay if one tests positive for it, but for that genetic disorder, the other party is not allowed to be positive for it. So that's one way to highly guarantee that the child does not have any kind of genetic disorder, perhaps handicap, what have you, because they're going to see that in advance and know as a red flag, okay, if we create an embryo and they're both positive, for example, sickle cell anemia, for Down syndrome, for other kinds of rare genetic disorders out there, they're just not going to do it. So in that case, one would need to find another egg donor if one was positive in that instance. But still this waiting game of, oh, am I going to have high quality embryos? Are we going to have enough? Are they going to come through the process? And then they're going to be frozen. And I know that things can go wrong during the thawing process when they're unfrozen, if they survive, whatnot. So it's always this kind of push and pull, this yin and yang, like I say, like this, all these hopes and dreams of what could happen and being positive and thinking, oh, it's, we're in this stage of the process, this is coming, manifesting, but then kind of thinking of all the things that can go wrong, all the crazy scenarios in your head, all the people involved. What if medical mistakes happen? Or what if it just doesn't work out? What if the outcome is not what we wanted? So every step through this process, it's always this contrast of positive and negative hopes, fears, that is very mentally draining for a person, especially when you're trying to keep it all together at work, when you're talking to your friends, and it's kind of always in the back of your mind, It's not an easy task, especially if you are kind of going through this and people maybe aren't aware. If there are setbacks in the process and you don't want to talk about it, but you still have to go out into the world and live your life, you're wearing a mask, basically, or you're not revealing everything in your life. I'm kind of a person that's an open book. I like to tell people anything they ask of me, but I was very cautious during this process to reveal too much. So I always felt kind of a weight a little bit on my shoulders, thinking, well, I really want to talk about this to people, but I don't know if it's the right time. I don't know if it's the right place, the right setting, whatever. Will they understand? Again, having resources, having kind of a network of people that you can go to and talk to throughout the process is super important. So we created our embryos. We were also very, very fortunate to have enough embryos, to have healthy embryos for both of us. The next part. So we flew back from the US, feeling really good about having been in the clinic, visiting our agency, going through that whole process. Then we were a bit surprised. We actually, within a couple of days, already were introduced to a possible surrogate match. So we were thinking, wow, like this is really going fast. And yeah, they're really delivering, they're really coming through. And then even though I must say we were actually a bit unsure with this surrogate that they introduced to us, but we always said, well, we'll give anyone a chance. We would like to have a first conversation with them and meet them, so why not? So then when we communicated that to the agency, they immediately came back to us and just said, oh, her situation has changed. She's left the state. She had to move, kind of some family emergency or something, so she's not available. Like, well, okay, well, that's kind of a blow. I mean, like I said, we were like a bit unsure if she was the right one, so that's also okay. But nevertheless, like you're kind of thinking, oh, things are going well, this could go fast, and then suddenly, okay, well, she's not going to work out, so fine, fine. We'll wait for the next one. We'll be patient. We just started the process. What could go wrong? And then, weeks go by, months go by. Also to preface, when we had the conversation with our agency about what we want in a surrogate, what are our criteria in a surrogate, what are absolute no-goes, what doesn't matter to us, whatever it is, that was also a very uncertain process because we were introduced with so many criteria that we didn't know that we had to think about. So they're going to ask you every type of question about the surrogate, everything possibly about her health, her age, how many times she has been a mother, how many times she's been a surrogate. I mean, we literally were asked by our agency, would it be okay if a surrogate was already a surrogate 14 times? And you're like, what? I never thought I would be confronted with a situation where someone says, oh, you want a surrogate? If it's her 15th time, is that okay? You're like, 15? I can maybe think 2, 3, 4, 5 max, but the 15th time? I don't know. Okay, maybe a lot more common. What if it's her first time being a surrogate? She's never done it before. At least the thing is, in the US, pretty much all surrogates have been mothers themselves. They have their own children. That's pretty much a really strong criteria. Not to say it couldn't happen, especially with altruistic surrogacy, but for commercial surrogacy, they've all had a successful pregnancy at least once. So then it comes to the question, well, what if it's her first time? Then that kind of opens up the questions, well, is she experienced? Could something go wrong? Could she have a miscarriage? She doesn't have the proof so much other than the one time having her own kid, for example, that she could be successful. So at least for us, having healthy embryos, having enough embryos, something like that would not be such a high criteria. But for example, with couples that don't have a lot of embryos available, that maybe have lower quality, maybe that have tried several times and it's failed, finding another surrogate, maybe it's their last embryo. So they need to find a surrogate who's maybe the most experienced, has really proven that she's been healthy through all of her pregnancies. So, these are criteria that they're asking you that are super important, of course. But then there's all kinds of random things, whether about, is it okay if she lives outside of the state of California, if she's a certain religion or has certain beliefs? What about the topic of abortion? What if they plant one embryo and it splits and you suddenly have twins? Would the surrogate be willing to reduce one of those pregnancies if the doctor recommended it, for example? So you're suddenly confronted with so much criteria that one has never, been posed in their life. And yeah, the whole surrogacy, there's not a textbook that you can just follow. And because so many people are going through it their first time who don't have a lot of resources, we had all kinds of preferences that we maybe thought, but the whole time we were always second guessing those things. We were always thinking, okay, well, like, what if we say we wanted this way, but then that limits our availability of surrogates? So you never really know. On the one hand, yeah, this is our preference of maybe how we want things to go, but then we were kind of like, well, this is our preference, but if she's not like that, or if she doesn't want that, then it's fine, because, we just want to find someone. We don't want to just, and like, we didn't have any kinds of crazy demands. Really any demand. We demanded that she be healthy, that, she eat well and like take care of herself, obviously not smoke or drink or all those, kind of things that most people would be concerned about when finding a surrogate. But we heard a story from our agency where they said a couple, they had a criteria that the surrogate was not allowed to drink tap water. So they installed filters in our house. So, that's an extreme example maybe of someone looking for a surrogate to say, this is something in our lives that's important to us, and we want her to also abide by that. But you're going to limit your availability of surrogates. Maybe you say, oh, the surrogate has to eat vegan. Well, are you going to find a surrogate out there that's going to be willing to be vegan for more than 9 months? I don't know. Exists out there, probably also in a state like California, but it really limits your options. So as we were waiting for a surrogate match, we were kind of at the same time, like, ever so slightly reducing any kind of outstanding criteria that we did have, kind of saying like, well, we might have said this as a preference, but actually it's not such a big deal anymore. So, if you find someone, she doesn't fulfill that point, could you still please introduce her to us anyways? The months were going by, and, it really starts this whole waiting game. And this waiting game, it really, really gets to your head, because especially when it comes to this criteria, you're thinking that it's on you. Did we make the right decision? Did we say the right thing? Why is it taking so long? Is it because of us? Is it because we're gay? That is unfortunately also something to take into consideration, that a lot of people that become surrogates want to do it because of maybe religious reasons, or because they really feel a strong calling to help women who, for example, cannot have a baby themselves. So they just maybe don't consider having gay men, whatever it is. But because the whole process is not super transparent in that sense. Like, you don't really know all of the steps and what's going on with the agency. So you're just kind of always thinking in your head, like, where are we going from here? What, did we do the wrong thing? But then not only that, I must say that, there are differences between communication between the US and Germany. I'm an American living in Germany, but I consider myself very much German now. I'm very direct. I don't need you to sugarcoat anything. I want the cold, hard facts. I want the truth. So when it came to corresponding with the agency, we were kind of always having to ask, what's the deal? What's the status? Can you give us an update? But we were prepared for you to say, well, it's going to take 6 months, and you just need to accept that. But we just weren't really getting any clear answers. I think Germans can't accept that at all. Like I said, we need cold, hard facts. Just tell us what's going on. That was also really, really difficult, was during this time of waiting, already waiting anyways, but dealing with the agency, kind of having clear communication, being transparent. And I think overall, like, I'm not criticizing anything about the agency. There are some also differences in communication between Americans and Germans, but that is the hardest thing, is like this silence, this kind of just, I'm going on through my day as if everything is normal and as everything is okay, or at least I have to pretend that because there's really no alternative. That, I think, is the hardest part. So again, I kind of preface this at the beginning of the video, but please, if you're considering surrogacy, just know that this waiting game of finding a surrogate this part that I'm talking about right here, of not knowing what the timeline's gonna be. Are you gonna have a match? When is that match coming? Maybe you have a match and the person backs out or it doesn't work out, whatever. This was really, really the hardest part of the whole entire journey, I must admit. So please do not take it lightly. Please, if you find yourself in this position, ask for help, ask for resources, know that you're not alone. So while all of that is still kind of going on, so maybe the next part of the emotional roller coaster, it's not all negative emotions. There's also a lot of happy, joyful moments in the process. So while we're kind of doing this whole waiting game, finding a surrogate match, not knowing, really what's happening, when we're going to be matched with someone, when we're going to find a surrogate, we kind of took it upon ourselves to start changing some things in our lives. So positive aspects. So we, for example, started preparing our house. This room I'm in now is actually part of our bedroom. It's also kind of part of our arts and crafts room. Before, we had a separate hobby room. Our bedroom was somewhere else. But this room that I'm in now used to be our home gym. And, we are very fortunate to have a sizable house. We needed a kid's room. We needed a room for the baby. So we spent the time between Christmas and New Year's every day changing a room in our house. So for example, the gym, which was in here, went all the way down into the basement. Then we moved our bedroom, which was next door, into this room. We moved the TV room into the former bedroom. That former TV room became the guest room. The guest room, our office, the changing room, our wardrobe. The hobby room also went into the TV room in a corner. And then what the hobby room was before is now our kids' room. That was a nice part, because kind of this little preparations, that was like a very physical thing to do, but then kind of this mental preparation of, wow, we're preparing the baby's room, and getting the house ready, and that's exciting. And that's something that I think every parent goes through, is like those little preparations in the house. But still, on the other hand, doing financial preparations, doing all kinds of things on our to-do list, just all of those little things in life to keep us busy. There was a lot going on. We had a big to-do list. We had a lot of things to accomplish. We still do, never ending, a lot of loose ends to kind of sort out, a lot of things to get ready for. That's also not easy. I mean, it can be fun if you're a crafty person, or like to do things yourself or what have you. That can be a really fun part of the process. process, perhaps, finding, picking out furniture, painting rooms. I look back at that time as a really nice time because now the whole house has a different vibe, a different energy, which is really nice. So next part of the process, we finally are matched with the surrogate again after, I would say, perhaps about 9 months of waiting from the first failed match. And wow, we had just been waiting for this moment for so long. The potential surrogate we were introduced to was so perfect that we thought, but long story short, unfortunately, she didn't work out and we were back to the drawing board. And I think considering everything that I just said and now telling you it didn't work out, so suddenly really getting our hopes up to suddenly having everything be taken away and starting back from square one, that was a huge blow. I mean, that was devastating. Although I did mentally prepare myself for something like that to happen, I think during everything that I talked about, you're always kind of in the back of your head preparing for the worst or saying, what if? So even though it was a huge blow, I don't know, I somehow kind of expected it. I mean, not like I wanted it to happen or I thought it would ever be a reality, but in this 9 months of waiting, I always thought to myself, well, even if we find a surrogate, she could not work out, or maybe if we're trying implantation, maybe she doesn't get pregnant. Every single part, like I said, everything is so complex. There's so many people involved. So as soon as like everything is going the right direction, it suddenly can all be taken away from you. It can suddenly not go in the right direction. So the whole process is kind of taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, I must say. And I mean, we didn't know where to go from there. And we just thought, are we going to have to wait so long again to find a surrogate match? That was just extremely emotional. It was so challenging. I mean, yeah, you can just imagine everything that I just explained, all of your hopes and dreams. And like I said, preparing everything and finally a surrogate match and she's great. And you're just imagining the process going along and everything that's to come and thinking about your baby, and then suddenly, okay, back to square one. But I mean, it was kind of a Christmas miracle. Basically, a few days after we found out that our surrogate match wasn't going to work out, the agency did provide us with a third match. And I mean, in the end, I knew for myself that this is the way that things were supposed to work out. I really trusted the process. I mean, even though I had so many doubts, so many uncertainties, you just have to trust the process because the point is you have no other option. There is this process of doing surrogacy in the US, and these are all the challenges. So you can either accept the process or you can resist it. And as we know about any kind of resistance, whether it's resistance in the body, in the mind, it just brings about pain and turmoil. So you have to accept the process. And accepting the process also means unexpected wait times, changes in the timeline, what have you. But when we finally had our third surrogate match, for me, this was really just a sign from the universe of, actually, she's the one. We had to go through everything else in order to get here, but now we're here. It worked out. We have our surrogate. She's amazing. It's truly a blessing. Signing the contract, getting the medical clearance, all the different clearances that we needed. That was just a big, huge relief in the process, signing that legal contract, knowing she's our surrogate. Lots of moments of happiness and joy and looking forward to the future. But as I said, with every step of the process, there's more to come. Is the embryo going to take? Is she going to get pregnant? If she does, is she going to miscarry? You just don't know. And especially I think for anyone, even if just someone conceiving naturally, the first 3 months are, of course, some of the most critical times during the pregnancy. So all of this waiting of thinking, will she get pregnant? If she's pregnant, will she miscarry? Will the baby be healthy? That first ultrasound appointment, is everything going to be okay? Is there going to be anything wrong? And even though you're just so happy and so looking forward to everything that's to come and it just feeling so real, she's pregnant, it's coming. But of course, at any moment that could also be taken away. Anything could happen in the meantime. And just, luckily that hasn't happened for us so far. So I don't know what would happen if unfortunately anything happened to our baby, but that, of course, I mean, I haven't luckily experienced that, and I hope I never do, but I do know so many people that have. I don't want to have to go through that. And I mean, we could do a whole nother video on just the topic of losing a child during pregnancy, but that fear you always carry around with you, and and it never really goes away. So now that I've talked up into the point of finding a surrogate, implantation, I'm not going to go into any further detail because we want a little bit of privacy through the process and don't want to necessarily reveal where we are right now in the process. There'll be a lot more to come, so stay tuned. Please subscribe to Papaarade. There's going to be a lot of exciting updates in the next month, so stay tuned. But to start to wrap up a little bit, I think the first important point to take away is first trusting the process. As I said, you have to trust the process because you don't have another option. So if you resist the process the whole time, then you're going to cause even more turmoil in your body. You're going to create stress, resistance. I mean, I know through my mindfulness and meditation practice, resistance creates tension in the body. Tension in the body can create a response to tension, and that response can lead to emotions. Emotions can lead to thoughts. Thoughts can lead to emotions. It's, this crazy cycle that can just really lead to devastation. So don't resist, trust the process. It's okay. And the process is crazy, it's complex. There's so much unknown, but it's the journey that you're going through. So just trust the process. And yes, please know that setbacks are a part of that process. Waiting is a part of that process. So having acceptance about that does, I think, make going through the process a bit easier, because at least you can mentally prepare yourself a little bit for that, or at least you can know and expect that. So I think that makes the difference, is just not like necessarily preparing for the worst, because then you're just thinking, okay, the worst can always happen, but just being a bit realistic. And I would, for example, challenge you to find an agency that maybe is a bit more realistic. You don't necessarily want to go for an agency that just seems like they're making all kinds of promises, but then can't actually deliver. And of course, I mean, at any point, one could change an agency. Of course, maybe things change during the process. You never know about the pool of surrogates, who they have coming through the door, the availability. There's just so many factors, like I said. So you can't just point it down on one thing. Just know to just let it go a little bit and trust the process. The next thing is emotional resilience. Resilience is such an important virtue and ability to learn, and actually you can learn how to be more resilient. So there are so many resources out there. I find being more resilient comes through a mindfulness meditation practice, through taking care of myself, reducing stress and anxiety in my life. You can actually train your mind and your body to be more resilient. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice, but it is something that you can take time every day, even if it's just 1 minute out of your day, to be more resilient. When it comes to all of the setbacks, just not letting that get to you too much, I would say. Also a part of acceptance, but just knowing, okay, this thing happened, but how am I going to choose to react to this? Again, I could resist, I could act really crazy, I could be emotional, I could cry, I could scream, and that's okay too, if that's what you need to do. I'm not saying that that's not a great reaction, but I just mean is that I learned how I could get through this better is if I really work on my physical and my mental health, my resilience practice, my mindfulness practice, and being a more mindful person and concentrating on things like spirituality or inner peace, for me, made the process a lot easier, because when all of the crazy things that happen in the world, the world's a crazy place, surrogacy is a crazy complex process, you can just tackle all the situations a little bit better and just get through them a little bit better without creating too much stress and kind of trauma responses in your body. I mean, of course, there were a lot of instances where that didn't happen. It wasn't perfect, but I just know that it would have been a lot more challenging for me to go through this process if I didn't have a mindfulness and resilience practice. So big tip from me. So, I mean, I talked a lot about my personal experiences, and of course, could also, bring my husband into this. We did do a podcast on this very topic, but being a married couple, going through this together, creating a family together, this had a lot of strain on a relationship. So not only did we need to work on ourselves, we needed to work on a relationship at the same time and go through all of these challenges and setbacks together. So really, communication is key, and really just working to grow together and not let all of the setbacks take a toll on your relationship. We really learned how to navigate stress, but still be connected to each other. I would say we also really learned how to communicate differently, and that helped us grow immensely. And this is a journey that made us stronger as individuals, as gay men, as a married couple, as future dads, as parents. I mean, to go through all of this for years of planning and hopes and dreams and fears and setbacks and love and just every possible emotion that one could have throughout this process, that just brought us so much closer together in ways I can just not describe. I mean, not only on kind of an emotional level, but really a spiritual level, and we're in this together. We did this together, and we're going to come through it okay. Whatever the outcome is, for us, it was a positive thing. It really was. It helped our relationship immensely, and I just feel like even the waiting and the setbacks in the end were a good thing, because that really allowed us to work on ourselves, work on a relationship, and we could then accordingly be better people, be better dads, be a better couple for our future child. In the end, hopefully the child will be thankful for that, because if we hadn't gone through this process, I don't know the kind of parents that we would have been. So in closing, I want to invite you in the conversation. What were your emotional ups and downs in starting a family? What were setbacks like in your surrogacy journey? What was your emotional roller coaster like? Were things that I talked about being extremely painful and difficult and challenging, were they easy for you, or vice versa? It's a roller coaster, so there's so many different bumps, there's loops, twists, turns, things unexpected, so it's going to be different for everyone. What did you do to stay resilient, to deal with setbacks, to deal with unexpected changes in your timeline, to deal with really, really painful emotional things that went wrong? I want to hear your stories. And just know, whether surrogacy, adoption, IVF, whatever process is, you're not alone. You have resources, and that's why I made this video. I want to share them with you because we need to be open about mental health, about challenges. We should never have to be silent. So I hope that sharing my experience gives you also a little bit of hope, but also know that it's okay to feel all these emotions. And also, I must say, to be a bit more realistic about the surrogacy journey, because it's not something that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people want to talk about the medical aspects of surrogacy. They want to talk about the financial aspects of surrogacy. Let's be open to the emotional aspects of surrogacy, whether that's from the surrogate perspective or the intended parent's perspective. But it is, like I said, for me, it was the most taxing part of the journey. All of the legal, medical, psychological, everything else that went into it did not pale in comparison to the emotional journey that we went through. So I would encourage you to post your stories or ask questions in the comments. Absolutely love if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got some amazing insight into the emotional aspects of surrogacy. See you next time.